Well, welcome, Tony Cran, to the Nation of Artists. We're taking a look, usually inside the studio. In this case, us and the work couldn't fit simultaneously. These works obviously are of a fairly grand scale. Working in a small space, how much does that inform your work?
Yeah, I think it's come about. The scale's come about after going overseas, going to Europe, and seeing the small, compact kind of spaces and the way people live there, and thinking about Melbourne and how tightly packed we are here. After growing up in North Queensland and spending a lot of time outside, it's kind of this body of work's actually more of a reflection on my take on the Australian psyche after seeing these things, after seeing like old European art. Yeah, especially after I spent like 2 years pretty much homeless, like hitchhiking around Australia, living under bridges and things like that. So there's that thing of, wide open spaces.
And the colours certainly reflect that as well. They tend to be this kind of uniquely Australian orange that even in Australian cinema you can see, like the way people light the films tends to be a uniquely Australian feel. It's got that cinematic quality.
Well, yeah, it's stolen from Mad Max a fair bit too. So.
But even the fact that you've added these extra panels, and you mentioned a second ago that it wasn't your original intention to have those.
No. Well, as you've seen, a studio's it's such a tiny space in there. Without these extra empty spaces on the end, it hit both walls, and it felt like it was expensive until I brought it outside to have a look at it.
Yeah.
And also even just that the ratio. It looks more like a screen like this.
And I mean, each of these has, as you said, an Australian feel. And what's weird is that you've gone to Europe to discover that.
Yeah.
But your series before was more kind of mythological and a lot of use of animals.
Yeah.
Was there were you done with that, with exploring that?
Yes and no. That was actually, a lot of the last work was looking at ideas of what gets called lowbrow, and the idea of kind of almost like pop culture imagery, like from children's storybooks, things that you see prints of similar things in like suburban houses of people who don't really care for art, never educated in art, and all that kind of thing. Actually looking for symbols within that talk about deeper human issues, but from a really uneducated and unpretentious way. Like there is that thing a lot of the time. This is for myself. I find a lot of the time in a lot of work, I have this feeling that it's so exclusive that it doesn't really invite humanity in at all. And the last body of work is actually about trying to, in a way, dumb it down.
Yeah.
So.
Although the titles suggested otherwise. They show a great deal of thought goes into the titling of your pieces.
They're still well thought out. It's just that they're actually probably more thought out like these than what I normally do, to make it so stripped down and to make it so easily accessible. It's actually harder to do. And
so when will you show this series?
About 3 months' time, November.
Yep, so November 2009.
Yeah.
And it'll be at the Helen Gorey Gallery in Paran in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Tell us about the titles of these 3 pieces that we see here.
This one on the end is an immovable object versus an unstoppable force.
Yep.
It's actually it's a thing of the invasion, colonial guilt and ideas of the invasion. It's a native kite eating her hair. I thought it kind of turned on the end too, because the immovable object obviously would have been the original culture that's here, the unstoppable force being the invaders, but then to actually have the indigenous animal eating like an introduced species, it kind of...
It's a reversal of fortune.
Yeah. Well, it just nicely, folds it in on itself.
Yeah.
This one is called Stumbling Block, and it's actually from a Paul Kelly song of the same name. If you listen to the song, see what it is. But it's actually It's Burke and Wills. It's a Burke and Wills sculpture from the city, but all overgrown and imagined like it's being engulfed by the landscape as they were. It's kind of that funny thing of how we really seem to, I don't know, we really seem to like put this failure, the idea of failure up on a pedestal in this country, and if you try too hard, you're a try hard, and all that kind of thing, and how they were so badly informed, and the whole thing was a complete screw up, and yet, you know, our heroes. The only guy who survived doesn't even have a monument.
And the piece at the end?
That's a take on a flag. That's that one's called United Dominion, and it's about, you know, the ownership and responsibility.
Yeah. A lot of people look at plastic bags and think of American Beauty, the film.
Yeah, it's you know, fine enough, but
yeah,
prefer Magnolia. Have you seen Magnolia?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the humour in the titling of the pieces, and yet the pieces themselves, by virtue of their size and their subject matter, seem to have like a certain gravitas to them. Is that your way of staying sane? Coming up with that kind of humorous kind of play for them?
Yeah, close to. Yeah, that and skateboarding.
And do you work on these pieces like just as you feel like it, or to deadline and around the clock, or are you like a 9 to 5? This is my zone. This is my time.
I've got white rabbit syndrome. I'm freaked out that I have no time. I've got this insane fear of mortality, and I feel like I'm going to run out of time at any moment. So I work way too much.
So you'll just get out of bed in the middle of the night and keep working on them, or?
Not really. My girlfriend doesn't really like that, but as much as possible. I tend to get up quite early, and I tend to go to bed fairly late. You know, so.
Yeah.
But it's more even if I'm not working, I seem to be working in my head.
Yeah. And you mentioned like going and being inspired, obviously, from your trip in Europe. But what artists there that you kind of keep as maybe not references for your own work, but certainly as people who inspired the journey?
All right, straight up, Brett Whiteley, as unfashionable as that is. My first ever artistic religious experience was with his painting Alchemy. I was actually hitchhiking through Sydney at the time and managed to talk my way into his old studio when it was shut. And I actually felt that thing behind me. It was the first time I ever really felt what art could do. So Whiteley, Streeton, because I'd like to lift his technique pretty much, like Arthur Streeton, and Egon Schiele, especially after going to Europe and seeing his Death and the Maiden and the Lovers. They're amazing. Yeah. But it's mostly those three. But the modern art-wise, Gregory Crewdson and Walton Ford, I like those guys a lot. Cool. Gregory Crewdson, the photographer, does those cinematic kind of images, and Walton Ford does these like fake colonial kind of paintings. Yeah.
And like music and stuff like that, do you paint with it on or with it off?
Most of the time, music and films. So
going in the background.
Yeah. Films I know off by heart are probably Royal Tenenbaums, Dead Man, funny as it sounds, Roman Holiday. I love that movie.
I think that was playing when we were in there.
No, that was Harvey.
Oh, that was Harvey.
Yeah, I like Harvey. Old blues, actually. Blues particularly helps for painting. Unless it's the beginning of the
Do you collect other artists?
Yeah, trade. I can show you some stuff when we go back inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, trade as much as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, your girlfriend's works in your space as well.
Yeah.
Did you meet around art?
Yeah. We met at school when I was in honours. We met in a very dramatic way. I was breaking up with my girlfriend at the time, and Marianne and I kind of fell in love at roughly the same time. And it was a bit of a social faux pas because my girlfriend at the time and myself were actually working together, and we were doing installations together, and we were starting to get a bit of recognition, and we broke up, and then I just kind of vanished for a while.
And what do you like? Coming from Queensland, working in Victoria, do you feel much of a difference? Is there more of an acceptance of the artist's life here?
Yeah. Well, you don't get beat for it anymore, you know. So that's a good thing.
It's always healthy.
Yeah. In general, it's so much different. Although I have to admit, I was really naive when I got here, and I thought that it was going to be this. Everyone was going to be working from some kind of calling, and it was going to be about something big and, you know, something that's about the bare bones of life and everything. And then got disappointed when I found out that, you know, half of it's just a scene and all that. And up there, I knew like 3 other artists who were all nut jobs and never shown, and were amazing and didn't have a chance to show.
Yeah. So here it's the slog versus the scene.
Yeah, which is why I don't, like, I go see a lot of shows, but I don't really go to openings.
Yeah.